lot of deeper R&D things that are getting really interesting. And we're just kind of in that balancing game of like, where are the models? Is GPT the thing and always going to be the thing? I'm not so sure it will be, right? Long term, Scott can help me with that.
And I think we're hitting probably one of the biggest, one of the challenges, or attempting to do that with this podcast, right, is education and training of what AI is and what AI isn't.
Don't be afraid to move forward. And it comes down to a single, small little word: data. Talk to us about data. Don't be afraid to have your data prepared and ready to move forward.
Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to come today to talk about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, AI, continues to be one of the most influential yet disrupting technologies to impact the AEC industry in decades. In some cases, we're seeing that it's impacting us somewhere between 25 up to even 95% in terms of the automation of where we're at. ChatGPT engulfed the industry in November 2022. And here we sit almost 2 years later and seeing the impacts of other technologies and other tools that are moving forward. The next 10 years will completely be revolutionized with the impacts of AI. The industry needs to figure out how to harness this technology, use it, innovate, and automate where we're moving as part of the AI revolution. I am really excited to be here co-hosting this with Scott Ringel, VHP's very own AI lead. Scott comes to us with a background in the technology space, which complements what we're trying to do at VHP. He brings a wealth of experience actually driving AI and the practice and the business, and we're going to hear a lot from him. Scott, thank you very much for joining us today.
Dave, Micah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to our conversation.
So today, Scott and I are joined by Micah Callow, Technical Director for AEC and Environmental Consulting with Esri. Micah, we're extremely grateful for you to take the time and join us today and talk about this very instrumental and challenging topic.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to be here with you guys. My name is Micah Callow. I'm the Technical Director for AEC and Environmental Consulting here at Esri. My focus is on helping connect kind of the AEC business with what Esri does and kind of think about it from a strategic perspective. I joined Esri maybe 5 years ago now. Seems gone fast. Right before COVID, and I've helped to grow the sector and the focus on AEC here at Esri in that time. Prior to that, I had worked 30 plus years in the AEC business between two different companies. So I've spent most of my life as a practitioner on the AEC industry side in many different areas, all over the place for all the things that AECs do.
Hey, Scott, thank you for joining us. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'll give you a quick summary here. My journey began back in 1992 in IT. Come a long way since then. But my passion for AI formally began in 2017, which I think is relevant to our conversation today. After reading the now famous white paper on transformer models called Attention is All You Need. Kind of the rest was history after that. I was obsessed with the technology and proceeded to hone my skills at companies like DXC Technology, one of the largest global systems integrators out there, and Google and Microsoft, as you already mentioned. I kind of specialize in foundation model architecture and solve unique problems for our Fortune 500 clients over at those locations where I was at before. Now specializing in machine learning frameworks, including neural networks, and I help drive advanced AI use cases here at VHP, focusing on all things AI and helping integrate it into all of our workflows and drive innovation and deliver better outcomes across the board. That's why I'm here.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. And I really wanted to take this session and really break it down into like three different areas. First area, I wanted to talk about what is AI doing in the industry. So this is a high level, what AI is actually in terms of disruptors, some of the benefits, some of the challenges that we're seeing. The second area that I wanted to get into is really, Micah, this gets to you and what Esri is doing. Where is Esri going? What are we working on? And then the last part I wanted to go is, where do we see it going, right? This is a challenge, and I don't know that we actually fully have our arms wrapped around it. 3 years, maybe 5, 10, 15 years, there's going to be some challenges that everybody in the industry is going to be faced with. So let's start out with some basics. Scott, I'm going to come to you first, and then Mike, I'll let you go next. Where do we see, and for the listeners that are new to AI, what is the definition of AI? What does it mean to you?
Okay. Let me give you my personal opinion on this first. So to me personally, artificial intelligence, in this case, focusing on the AEC industry, is a game changer that enhances how we design, engineer, and build across the board, basically. It's about bringing smart, adaptive technology into our workflows daily and enhancing our capabilities. That's my personal kind of umbrella around this. From my experience, AI simulates human intelligence processes like learning, reasoning, and problem solving through computer systems. I mean, that's what AI really is. I've seen firsthand how AI can shift through massive amounts of data to help us make better informed decisions, anticipate project outcomes, even suggest design alternatives, etc., specific to AIC. So consider it your tireless assistant, if you will, that handles the heavy data lifting and allowing us to focus more on creativity and strategic problem solving. Kind of my philosophical view of AI, if you will. There you go.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And Mike, I did this on purpose. I was like trying to get the general, and then I know Esri playing in the geospatial world. What is Esri, and what is your definition of AI, and what does it mean to the listeners, and where we're going?
Well, when I think about it, and I cheat because I'm very much an AEC practitioner, right? That's where I've lived my life. My job has always been connecting the technology and the business needs, right? Like really trying to understand it. And AI is nothing new. It's been around, and the components of it have been around for quite some time. It's just now starting to get that the technology, the demand, and the drive is beginning to start to match each other. And coming over here on the product side, really the drive for me there was that I think the AEC industry is sitting at a spot where it's going to start to shift in a really big way. And I could see that coming from the seat I sat in before. And I felt like coming over on the product teams would start to really help, could start to help to steer that a little bit. Esri has played in this space quite a bit. And the thing that's most visible, I think, to our traditional geospatial people is what we refer to as geo AI, which is quite frankly machine learning, image extraction, getting details out of it. And that's where a lot of people start their AI journey that aren't practitioners of IT and technologists that are deep down in the bowels of the technology, but the business people. And that's where they see a lot of value, right? We do a lot in geospatial with imagery and image stuff. So that's where Esri's really got its start and its positioning. But like all other technology companies that develop platforms like Esri, including companies like Autodesk and Esri who are partnered together, we're all really beginning, just like you all, to start to think about how AI isn't a thing, a monolithic thing, but how it's something that starts to get woven into what we do to accelerate or to improve upon it.
I agree with you 100%. I think we're to the point where you're starting to see this upward movement of where AI is. Eventually, it will be part of the daily practice and who we are and what we do as engineers, planners, and scientists. So one of the questions I get asked a lot, right, and these are by people that do not know or do not understand AI, is what are some of the most significant benefits or areas that you're starting to see movement in using AI within the AEC space? So, Mike, I come to you first. Where are you seeing some of the biggest benefits in terms of return on investment or how people are using AI?
Right now, the one that's actually truly in the business that I see is the geo AI stuff, right? It's those models that we're beginning to put out on the living atlas of the world that we create and train on different imagery. We publish them out into the world. They're free to pick up for anybody that's got an ArcGIS license, and they can start to run them. And those have been traditionally being run in our professional desktop tool, ArcGIS Pro, kind of targeting that more data engineer, data analytics kind of persona and personality. But we're even starting to see those tools start to become able to access within the online environment. So your casual web-based users can start to get information off of that imagery. And why I like this the most is that the AEC industry, or really the geospatial side of things, has relied on imagery to be a major component of mapping. Basically making your road map, making your street map, making a parcel map, making maps of all the buildings. These have always traditionally been photogrammetric image-based type things and or survey. And we always want to get imagery on our projects, right? But in the old days, it was kind of hard and expensive to do that. So we didn't always get the best imagery. Well, now imagery and the technology behind it is becoming more accessible and readily available through drones and through other platforms and commercial offerings that all of a sudden we've got a lot of imagery and observations of what's going on out in the real world that we want to take advantage of. And we can take advantage of it in so many different ways because of AI. Why we coin it GeoAI is because we're looking at it and extracting geographic location meaning from those images. Everything from, is there a car here? Where's the fire hydrant? Get me all the trees. Stuff that we can do in mass and for a lot less money, right? Which makes project managers a whole lot more happy, right? Now we can do things better, faster, cheaper. That's really the starting point and the one that I see most practically being used. That's not in an experimental stage. It's truly in a production stage of use.
Mike, I've been in the business 30 years. I wish I would have had this tool 25 years ago to help me with my career. So if we go back in time, if we go back in time and actually do that, that would be amazing. Scott, turning to you, in terms of the benefits, where does VHP see some of the largest benefits or movement of AI?
Well, Micah's answer was extremely detailed and good, and mine's going to be a little bit more generic, wrapped around design services for VHP and where we're really focusing right now. It is the biggest impact that we see in AI currently is within design services space. So AI can generate multiple design iterations and optimize for factors like sustainability and cost, and predict how designs will perform under various conditions. Those are major leaps forward also in how we can enhance productivity, cost, go-to-market, everything that's wrapped around design services. AI has radically enhanced that capability. It not only accelerates the design process, but also leads to more informed and effective decisions. So again, decision-making across the board, everything has been enhanced through AI. Adopting AI-driven tools and methodologies, this design industry we were talking about achieves greater efficiency through various technologies we'll get into more later in this call. But bottom line, the impact that we see the most benefit from specific to the verticals that we're in is in the design process space, if that makes sense.
And I don't know that you'd have any disagreement. Micah was actually referring to their partners over at Autodesk. And I know, when you think about the geospatial world that Esri plays in and the design services side, it does go hand in glove. And I know that's a lot of effort that Esri and Autodesk and the other vendors are working with as well.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say, ultimately we're basically getting to better design buildings and infrastructure through the automation and AI processes and the design functionalities we have now. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Wow, better design, better buildings, better infrastructure based on AI.
So many more options, right? Like you can do and think about it in so many more ways with all those crazy overlays of sustainability and resiliency that we have dealing with hurricanes like we just had the other day. Like we need to consider these things in design because it's our new normal.
Yeah, we're starting to see a lot of that movement. You talk about the sustainability and the resiliency and moving in towards the design services. Scott talking about design, the embedded carbon calculations and how we're doing it. How do you optimize it? Scenario planning. What are some of the, Mike, what are some of your AEC clients that are some of the challenges you have with implementing the AI? What's keeping them up at night? And how do they actually stay ahead of some of the competition driving this? Yeah,
the AI term is a double-edged sword in a lot of ways, right? Because it's now the hot thing, right? We still are talking about digital twins, and that was a hot thing for a minute. And before that, it was big data, and there's always a hot thing. And I'm very happy to see that the C-level and AEC firms are beginning to understand that business transformation happens with technology, not outside of the technology, right? Like, so it's a component of it. So there's a lot going on there that's driving that forward. Some of the risks that I see when I look across many of the organizations is, in general, it's the data, right? Like their data, the most valuable thing an AEC has is its knowledge and its data that knowledge creates, right? And right now, most of that is created in files here and files there and somebody's computer over there and some SharePoint drive over there, and it's thought of project by project because that's the project manager's drive. Do the project, deliver the project, right? But that data has a lot of value that people don't even realize at this point in time. And so if the data is not organized or accessible or something that you can actually take advantage of to interrogate with AI, then you then have to start there first to then be able to take the AI step, right? So there's no like magic silver bullet where we're just going to feed it random stuff and it's going to give us amazing answers. we're going to have to do some data engineering work to make that work the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. Scott, I know data's been big for you and where you're going. I think Micah took your thunder there a little bit by saying data, because that's it. Where do you see some of the biggest challenges with the AI side?
Biggest challenges on the data side. So biggest challenges with AI, I actually have 5 things I'd like to say about that. Number one, as Micah already pulled it out or pointed out, data quality and availability. That's a huge one. AI models are only as good as the data they're trained on. So inconsistent, incomplete, or biased data can lead to inaccurate predictions and insights. I mean, it's not just in this industry, in this vertical. It's in all of them. Coming from the systems integration world and working with many different verticals and markets, we see this as a common denominator across almost every aspect of building out AI models. Integration with existing systems is another problem. So when you incorporate AI into established workflows, and I talk to workflows, and legacy systems can be technically complex and resource intensive. Having the right teams to know how to do that. These are blockers to people that are trying to get into AI at a more advanced level. And there's ethical and legal considerations. The other one I think is important is a skills gap. Again, these are coming more from the systems integration side of seeing the general common denominator core issues when it comes to challenges with AI and integrating it into existing or even new startup systems. Skills gaps is one. Another one is change management, overcoming organizational resistance to new technologies. This is not just this. This could be, again, as Micah said, there's always a new thing. I remember dating myself a little back in the day when the data people and the IT infrastructure teams and the voice teams didn't get along when they started merging voice over IP into infrastructure. That was fun. Same kind of scenario. So change management is an issue. Those are my 5 concerns for biggest challenges in AI. And that's some pretty common denominators, like I said.
Yeah, and I think we're hitting probably one of the biggest, one of the challenges, or attempting to do that with this podcast, right, is education and training of what AI is and what AI isn't. Today, I think AI actually is that great equalizer. Smaller firms have the ability to leverage and partner with Micah firms like Esri and actually take it and really work with their data, actually aggregate it, put it into a right structure format, and actually move it forward. So how Micah, Esri is one of the biggest providers of geospatial in the country, if not globally. How does Esri do that training program to get the message out of what you guys are doing? And this is more of give you a platform to say, here's where we are and here's where we're going relative to the training side of it. And then specifically getting into your Geo AI and the rollout and where people are going to be using that.
Yeah, I mean, Esri has a long history of having to build its own people, so to speak. When GIS first came onto the scene a little over 50 years ago, it was not something that was in the masses, right? So Jack Dangerman, the owner of Esri, did a lot of work in building GIS professionals within schools and education, and drilling back into those things and seeding that out so that people kind of understand what geospatial is, not as in its software, but as in its science, right? The idea of mapping the world is a thing. So there's a lot of need to try to push back into the education systems and make sure that what we're churning out into the industry is going to be people that understand. The beauty of that is most of these kids have been working with this stuff more than any of us have, us old people, and they come to it naturally. And in some cases, I'm finding that you can pick up people that know a lot about it at a very young age and become very useful and effective. And in effect, they're doing exactly what you just said, Dave. They're using this new tool and this new capability to accelerate what they're doing in their career path. And a lot of us are standing around going, wow, that's amazing. And initially, it's going to look like voodoo magic, right? But at the same time, we have to your risk question from before, we still have to take it with a grain of salt, right? Like, we need to make sure that what we're getting is true information, that it's actually matching what we're doing. Esri does also a lot of effort, as you know, at conferences, at workshops. We put out learning paths. We do everything and anything we can to try to help people understand what they're doing so that they're not opening up some software and clicking the next button, getting a result and not understanding where that came from, which is why we say that when we talk about geospatial professionals getting into this area of AI, we start to see the developers that we've always had kind of using geospatial. And now we're beginning to see this analytics and data engineering and data science community that are being developed. And what we're starting to show is that they need to be thinking about how they work together. And so we're trying to do a lot of change management or evolution. There's another name Esri likes to talk about. I'm just used to change management. But trying to help those teams come together, because it's not about like taking a bunch of geospatial people and saying, you're all going to do this now. It's more about merging them together. Case in point, when we got into doing water models and utility models back in the late 90s, and the geometric network came out in the 2000s, and we were starting to model out all these utilities, we didn't do that alone with GIS people alone. We did that with the engineers and the people that know the water utility providers, right? The people that know that business. And together they started to do that. And then we worked through the programs. So from an Esri perspective, that's a huge one. As far as the GeoAI goes, we have a lot of learning paths. We also do a lot of documentation on those models that we stick out there so that people understand what they were trained on, how they are used, and how they're intended to be used, such that not that they can't use them for anything else. It's more that here's the starting point, and you need to understand where you're standing so that if you want to go from here to there, you can. Case in point, we had somebody take our building rooftop model, try to run it. It's based on U.S. data. I think they tried to run it somewhere like Saudi or Asia somewhere, and it didn't produce great results. It's because we wasn't trained on roofs that look like the roofs in that country, right? So with a little bit of extra training, the AEC firms were able to take that and then leverage it and be very successful with it. So we try to do a lot of outreach in that regard. It's also becoming a huge topic at every one of our events and every one of our meetings.
As you know, Micah, we agree with you. We think all the practitioners need to have the power of what Esri is doing and the GeoAI by putting it on. We have 2,200 employees at VHP. We want all 2,200 to be users of the Esri software and products. We believe that there's that much value and power. We actually have a targeted goal to get that on everybody's desk, hopefully in the next year or so. So moving in the same direction. And I want to actually take a little detour and launch, because you actually referenced something, and I agree with you 100%. This is a transition of the technology and the software firms partnering with the subject matter experts. So when you think about it from the AEC space, there are a lot of technology-based firms or software-based firms coming into the engineering space. So, where do you see, Mike, where do you see that relationship going over the next 5 years relative to the software firms entering into the AEC space? And then, Scott, from the flip side, you represent the engineering firm. How does that work from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a good one. I'd say, and this was definitely my experience, is I had a really good boss a long time ago, CIO, said, Micah, you can't do everything on your own, right? Build partnerships, build connectivity, build understanding. You can accelerate where you're trying to go by doing that. And that's exactly what we did. We built partnerships with those technology providers. We didn't see them as threats to us. We saw them as things that could accelerate what we're doing. But they don't understand the industry, the engineer's brain, the scientist's brain. That's not their world. And so we use them and work with them in partnership to make that such that we're putting what we know, or what you all know as AEC firms, with what they know in the technology to accelerate both understanding on each side. And the other thing we are definitely beginning to see, and Scott's an example of this, where AECs are beginning to pull the technology, true technology people into our space. I'm a GIS guy. I was trained as a GIS guy, a degree in GIS, and then learned all the technology stuff through practice, right? So I'm a little slower to the take, right? Whereas somebody that starts with technology and goes the other direction might be a little slower on the take on the engineering side. But together, we're a really powerful duo, and we can teach each other a lot. And I have been taught by more technology people than you can imagine. That's where I've learned what I know.
And Scott, from your perspective,
coming into the AEC space, coming from the technology realm, like to your point, working from systems integrators and working for the largest hyperscales or cloud providers in the world. Coming from the technology teams, the deep mind research teams that come from those facilities, you're right, it's a technology-first company. But the irony is, I think that I thought maybe I'd be bridging or leaving that gap or moving over to a vertical or a space where I didn't have the same type of synergistic alignment. And it sounds like a negative thing, but it's actually a positive thing. What I've found is that being in public sector and being in AEC has allowed me to bridge the gap. I used to see it from a client perspective. VHB would be a client. To me, it's now a very synergistic alignment on how I can take my various technology skills and apply them to much more detailed use cases and get deep into an industry that I think is incredible and screaming for more AI use cases across the board. So in a nutshell, it is a synergistic blend of companies that are systems integrators or product manufacturers in the technology space, blending with specialists like VHB to create better outcomes synergistically together than has ever been done before. Every company today is a technology company, like it or not. It doesn't matter what vertical you're in. You are a technology company, or you're going to be a yellow cab versus a Uber, or a Blockbuster versus a Netflix. So being synergistic together, I think, is a great alignment. I see other competitors that are trying to do the same thing right now. And as you said, Micah, there's technologists like myself coming into spaces in GIS or in AEC that are very synergistically aligned to help drive the business forward. And in summary, I think that's the best way I can put it, if that makes sense.
I just got to see us more actually pulling and partnering more with the software technology firms. Yes, VHB made a commitment to bring it in because, Michael, we needed to understand where the technology was going in order to be educated and smart to figure out where that digital evolution of VHB was going to be. So is it going to be a takeover? I don't think it's going to be a takeover. I think it's going to be a partnership. I think it's going to be something that those other firms that we refer to, the smaller firms that we all talk to and target as partners, that they're going to need to evolve and actually become educated on where they're going as well. There's one thing that several of the team members brought up to me is that I understand that there's like over 70 AI models that are trained and available for AEC firms. Maybe if you can tell us a little bit about that in terms of what are some of the example use cases, and maybe if getting into where and how do people access that?
So it is in ArcGIS, Living Atlas of the World. You can search that one online. It's the largest geospatial data repository in the world. We spend a lot of money and effort to make sure that there are cohesive layers, authoritative information that help the world kind of be a better place, ultimately. That's the idea. And we curate that information from commercial, from public sources, all kinds of different ways. And we do a lot of development for worldwide layers to help the world think about things like COVID when it spread. We were doing a lot of that, to land use, to understanding land use across the world. But then we have a lot of local providers and even individuals that provide content through the Living Atlas of the World. So it's truly Jack likes to call systems of systems approach. And the idea is with the software, they can publish the data in an open way and everyone can benefit from that information. And we make that really seamless and easy to do. We publish a lot of different things through the Living Atlas of the World. And one of those things is the Deep Learning Toolkit, DLPK, I think if you search for on Living Atlas, you will see all the models that we put out there. And those models range from everything like find the tree canopy or determine which trees are here, or use the segment anything model to find some tanks in an imagery, right? I can't tell you how many oil and gas tank farms I had to digitize. At one point in time, we had to convince them to stop doing it in PowerPoint. I mean, it's just such inefficiencies in these projects. And so we were doing it in GIS and we thought we were really innovative. Now with AI, like you talked about earlier, Dave, that job would be done and done, right? Like I could move from state to state and get those tank farms, understand what they're going to be when you're doing an EIS, when you're starting to when one company wants to buy another, or when they're responding to an emergency. We're seeing a lot around building and footprints and extraction. As a matter of fact, we've built a layer of buildings in the Living Atlas of the World, and it's open source. It's every building in the whole world. Little gray box out shell, which gives you a nice 3D footprint of it. We used AI to do that ourselves. So there is just a lot of ways to pull out information. There's even a couple in there. I've seen some recently around like looking at if there's a vehicle or a vehicle type, a truck entering a facility or not. So that gets beyond the traditional aerial photography and starts to look at videos. And we now have the ability to work with video CCTV feeds, not just imagery. So you really see this evolving and stepping. And we put a lot of those models out there to entice people to recognize that if they're doing it in a manual way, here's a better way. And I have seen a few projects so far where a few firms have adopted it and wiped out the competition pretty quickly. It is the new way of doing things. We want to take that complexity that we were doing before and the hours that it took us to do that. We want to be able to spend that time doing something more creative, more inventive. We want to move forward a little bit more. So that's why we stick it out there and it helps people to really accelerate what they're doing. And it's usually their first taste of AI, if you will.
Question is, when they look at that, when they use it, how do they provide feedback to you, and how do you actually get the information to make the models better? Because there's gonna be a lot of users out there that are gonna look at this and go, wow, there's a lot of good, exciting tools that Esri is producing as starting models that may want to be a partner with you to actually evolve. So how do they actually get information to you or participate to actually help these models grow and become smarter?
In so many ways, Dave. Esri is very flat, very matrixed organization. We have things like the communities, the community pages. There are a lot of communities that those have direct pipelines into our product teams. There's some communities around the AI and the image extraction and people that have a lot of discussion and even help each other out without Esri even being involved, right? There are a lot of channels. Our product management and product engineering teams are highly accessible. If you've worked in or around Esri, you've probably talked to a product engineer directly more than once. They're often at our events for communication. Teams like my team, my solutions engineers, we're always working through the accounts. And then we have a much deeper relationship with companies like VHB at the partnership level, where we have much deeper conversations like we did last week around not only where they think things are at today, but where things need to evolve tomorrow to make you successful.
I did have some questions around that. So more specifically, Mike, on the more technical side, just a little bit anyway. As far as the models are going, so are there, this might be a loaded question too, are there maybe 3 or 4 models that are top use cases? I know 70 models is a lot. And are those models, I'm assuming that some of these are highly specialized, smaller models that are tuned specifically for these exact use cases? Are those open source? How locked up are they? Can they be trained, fine-tuned, at what levels? Those kind of things. I'm more involved in the actual models themselves. Are you allowing people to mess with this stuff? That's what I'm getting at.
Very much so, and we encourage it, right? That is the idea, is that we are putting these out there as a starting point, not the end point. And the idea is that people will take them and do a lot of different things. The big ones we see now are the obvious ones. People that were doing impervious surface the old school way are now doing it through extraction. People that want to extract assets, like we've seen a lot around the power poles and the sag and the power lines and things like that. People that want to build more realistic scenes with the trees and stuff like that in 3D. The segment anything model has definitely been one, because there's a lot around not knowing what you're hunting for and just kind of looking for it, parking spaces and things like that. But we absolutely encourage people to take them, use them, and adapt them. I've seen others that, and even including myself, where I've taken them and adapted them for doing things like extracting assets along train corridors, which you're very difficult to get into. You have to be rail safe certified. And using 2 cameras that are GoPros and a GPS point, and that's snapping off pictures every couple of minutes, which means we can start to extract that data in a way that was previously more heavy and hard to do with LiDAR data, a lot easier to do with imagery, and we can use LiDAR data to back up and check our work if we need to, when we need to up the probability. So we just see a lot of people adapting them every day. I walk into a new customer. It's why I like to go sit with customers like VHB, because I learned a lot being there and listening to the team and what they're doing. And there's just some amazing innovations. it's what I hoped would happen 5 years ago is really truly beginning to happen. Is as we focus more on AEC, they're starting to jump and step faster and faster. It's amazing.
It is amazing, and that's really good to hear that type of collaboration you're allowing to happen with these models, because that's what it takes. And coming from, as everyone knows, like coming from Microsoft as an example, being able to use open source models, and obviously closed source models are a big foundational piece of Microsoft. Don't get me wrong, but the bottom line is open source, smaller models are becoming the way that we see AI being deployed on a more common, on a day-to-day basis. It's less expensive. It's easier to tune. You have a better outcome with the result. It is the 70 models you have, and the ability to collaborate very quickly with the team and go out and use it and customize it, I think is a huge step forward in getting the adoption of AI across all the verticals we're talking about. It's incredibly powerful, actually. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, we're if nothing else, the Living Atlas, we put a lot of effort into. The other thing that we do a lot of is the open standards groups, OGC, Building Smart International, a lot of the open things. We don't just say we're open. We put a lot of money and effort, and we publish open standards for everyone to use. We're not just about what we do with it. It's literally the building scene layer is a good example of that. I3S, that is an open standard that anybody in the world can use.
That's excellent to hear. Love to hear it. And back to you, Dave.
So, Mike, I wanted to go back to one of the previous comments that we were talking about. Is really AI, the AEC space, the ethical conundrum that I think that AI could present if not careful, sensitive PII data that's out there. What conversation should firms be having around this relative to it within their organizations? And what is Esri doing to actually also helping to actually get that message out?
Yeah. First and foremost, absolutely, this should be at the center of any conversations, the security, the privacy information. I worked for a global firm, so maybe the U.S. not so far ahead. And as you would see, we're at a state now where all this is going on. There's going to be injection at some point in time at the government level, right? Like it's inevitable. It's going to have to be. It's our responsibilities to understand that. But AEC firms have an added extra responsibility, because an AEC firm puts a stamp on something and says, this is what we're doing, and I'm an engineer, and this is possible to do, right? And not all of our work is about building something and stamping it, but the reality is a lot of it comes with the expectation that an engineer said, I can do this, therefore it's something I can do. So if we're relying on AI that's rolling on bad data and making decisions about how I should engineer something, that's not how AI should or could be used right now, in my opinion. Now, could it help the engineer to make some decisions and think through some iterations of what they're trying to do, such that they understand what that decision was being made from? Absolutely. So that's my biggest, and I get it all the time, because I want to run forward with the technology, and then the engineers, there's this level of kind of freak out for a moment, and then we all calm down for a minute and we start talking it through and understanding what we're doing and what we're using it for, and we go, well, this could actually help me. So you've got to get through that moment of chaos, I think, in these situations, and then work through, like Scott said, change.
I did mention that, I've been in the business 30 years, and I sit there and look at the parity between when I started and where it is now. And there's a lot of fear out there relative to AI. And I go back to when I started. I'm a traffic engineer by trade. I ended up having to do a strain pull calculation for a signal by hand. I did a calculation by hand, and then all of a sudden they handed me a software package and said, can you do it using this? It was fractions of the time. So I relate AI as being very similar to that, right? You're actually having another tool that you need to actually look at, check, validate, and make sure that you do not get those hallucinogens or errors that come out of the models. But realistically, it's incumbent on us, the engineers in the room, to actually make sure that happens.
I mean, the other thing, Scott, I'm sure you see this, is some of the reactions is to stick the head in the sand and kind of try to ignore it.
Absolutely. That was one of the blockers. We were talking about that just yesterday, in fact, not taking action or not paying attention or thinking this is another fad or just not wanting to adjust and change. Absolutely. See it a lot. It's number one of the that and data number. That's 1 and 2 blockers right there for implementation of AI.
Yeah.
So I was going to take the step forward now. I mentioned those 3 different areas. I want to start to look forward into the next 5 years in terms of some of the significant advancements. So, Mike, I'm coming to you. Esri, Geo AI, launch. Where are we going to go over the next 5 years, and where do you see it going? And what do you hope to get accomplished over the next 5 years in the AI space?
Yeah. So I talked a lot about Geo AI because that's the immediate low-hanging fruit, the thing that people can wrap their hands around right now. There are also smaller things that are happening, and I can't say that they're smaller. They're just more behind the scenes and more ingrained. One, for example, is we're building a lot of AI into our systems. I talked about that idea of weaving stuff in AI into the product. Survey 123 on I can't remember what version of it's the latest beta at this stage, or it might be the latest production release, has an AI function that I used a couple days ago. I asked it to create me a form for a or a meeting I was going to have where I wanted feedback on blah, 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 and I fed it some information and boom, it created me a form that I could send out to do a survey on. So that would have taken me an hour or 2 to think and come up with. Was it perfect? No. There's a couple things I threw out of there and some stuff I added because of my knowledge and what I'm seeking as far as information that I didn't prompt the AI for, right? Didn't feed it enough good information. But man, it did get me pretty far, pretty fast. And we're really thinking about that across all of our products. Back at the Federal User Conference earlier this year, some of you may have seen an AI prompt tool that was designed to allow people to ask questions that are geospatial and not have to go to a GIS person to get the answer. So, I want to understand my property. What's the value of it? What's within walking distance of this area? Is this property commercially viable, right? Like just being able to do things and get to geospatial information without knowing what geospatial is in the first place. So those are a lot of the assistant type models. And then underneath the hood, we've talked a lot about people who build applications and we have to know to turn this layer on and this thing and click this tool and click this button. Engineer would probably just rather ask it a question and get an answer, right? Like they don't want to know about those buttons and tools and all the things that are going on. So how do we take the AI and the assistance type chat models and make that better and faster? So that's a little bit of where Esri is focusing its attention. There's a lot of deeper R&D things that are getting really interesting. And we're just kind of in that balancing game of like, where are the models? Is GPT the thing and always going to be the thing? I'm not so sure it will be, right? Long term, Scott can help me with that.
I think AI will completely transform how we design and build by enabling real-time dynamic project design and execution. And that sounds like a marketing term, but I mean that sincerely. I see a future where AI is integrated into every phase of a project, from concept to construction. It's basically AI-driven systems will continuously analyze data, adjust designs, and even make real-time decisions on site. So imagine this, if you will. A condition changes on a construction site. A construction site, whether it's weather, supply chain disruption, unforeseen challenges, AI algorithms will automatically adapt project plans, reroute resources, and adjust timelines, and will continue with the overall goal of the project timeline and keep all this in mind at the same time simultaneously, this will eliminate many of the delays and inefficiencies that plague the industry today. It's a huge piece of where this eventually is headed, to where there's so much automation. There's people involved. It's a co-pilot, if you will, not to overuse that word, but it's a co-pilot for the people that are involved in these projects at all aspects and everyone co-developing this together. But the AI streamlines the process to that level. Architects, engineers, contractors will all be alongside with their AI system, allowing the creativity and the efficiency to be enhanced tenfold, 100-fold. In short, if I was to summarize this, the future will be a blend of human expertise and AI-driven precision to create a more responsive process for design across the board and architecture. I mean, that kind of philosophy is where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I 100% agree. I saw that. I was at a construction event recently, and they had an AI as one of the topics during the afternoon they were talking about, and I kind of thought, well, this will be interesting, right? Like these guys aren't using it, but they were quite well using it for like figuring out billing issues, looking at risk stuff. They were very much adapting it. But what they were doing, which was really good, was choking it down to the problem that they have, so constraining it for risk. But I find it interesting that this is the fastest I've ever seen anything get adopted in this industry in my life, right? Like ever. And more people are excited about it that I think barely can open up Excel or Word, right?
Oh, that's so true.
I do want to pivot and actually go with a closing question. And this is a general one takeaway, right? If you had to advise a firm that's just now getting into AI, that's just now starting to use AI, what is that one action that they should take today to actually prepare and get going into the AI space specifically? And Mike, it can be using it, the GeoAI specifically, if you like.
Well, as much as I'd love to sell GeoAI and ArcGIS, I'm actually going to say it's a little bit more about it's the people, right? It's going to be about the people, right? It's a lot of people management, a lot of change management, getting the right partners, getting the right staff brought in that has the experience that can help accelerate the rest of your staff, helping the people to understand where it's going to be. Technology is usually never the problem. It's usually the people transformation. And I know that from experience. I've been beat up more than my fair share trying to implement technology inside of an AEC firm. But I think now is the right time. And there are people out there that are really, they love to solve these problems, right? So work with them, figure out how you partner with them. And by all means, leverage GeoAI if you want to try to start doing something, right? Like that's a good starting point for some of those folks.
So as the engineer in the room, I agree with you. I think GeoAI is actually one of the first entryways and easy opportunities for a firm to actually start to engage and embrace. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to actually use it on some of the activities that we do across the entire footprint. Scott, the one takeaway, what's that one action that you have to basically advise the listeners to take note of?
Don't be afraid to move forward. And it comes down to a single small little word: data. Talk to us about data. Don't be afraid to have your data prepared and ready to move forward. And again, that's a general statement, but the net of this is the single biggest blocker. And to Micah's point is the people. If the people are already in the mindset of being ready to move forward with this technology, the number two blocker is going to be their data assets and their data state. So we need to talk about that and demystify that complex data that they have, which is not as hard as it sounds. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, as they say in sales terminology, wrapped around data assets. It just takes someone that knows how to analyze that, come in, have a conversation, do a discovery workshop to get you ready and prepared to go down that journey to build out AI applications and platforms at scale, because it all starts there.
Yep.
From there, it becomes magical. Not no pun intended. But that's my takeaway, Dave. It's going to be analyze data, and it all starts there.
You cannot do AI without good data, and I think, Mikey, you referred
good data.
Referred to that. Yeah, good data. Apologize.
Yeah,
good data there. I was sitting there and I was reflecting, and it's one of those general takeaways. And I think it's the eyes wide open, right, relative to where AI is and the industry is. I was going to come back with my response was the policies and be aware of what's going on within it. Micah, you referred to the state agencies and some of the regulations that are coming. I think for folks that would be listening to this, one of those key messages that we got out is agencies are already starting to look at this, already starting to understand the impacts of it. When you think about procurement and going after a project, oftentimes now they're including some provisions relative to the use of AI in your pursuit. Be careful. In some of these, they're saying you can be disqualified if you use AI as part of your submission. Same thing on the project delivery. When you think about like scoping a project and scoping and delivering a project for a client, some of the state agencies across the U.S. are now looking at, if you do not inform the PM that you're using AI as a delivery, then you could potentially be disqualified from actually the submission. So it's an eyes wide open for me. It is here, it is moving. I think both of you indicate it's moving exponentially. Mike, I'll be honest with you, I'm looking forward to seeing the excitement of where Esri has taken this over the next 5-10 years when I actually get my next 30 years in the industry.